Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 through 31. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. This is the word of the Lord.
My patient and I both knew that he was dying. If not today, then within the next day or two. And so Dr. Kular writes that he asked, "Is there somebody that I should call?" No. No one. No family members, no close friends. The patient recalled, I had a niece somewhere, maybe down south, but I haven't talked to her in years. And Kular writes that the sadness of his death for me was only surpassed by the sadness of his solitude and isolation. That isolation is bad for us. Isolation is bad for our bodies. Research has shown that a sense of isolation goes with increased inflammation, stress hormones, a weakened immune system, 30% more chance for heart disease and stroke. And isolation is bad not just for our bodies, but for our souls, for our identity. Kular goes on to write in this piece, he says, "Admitting that we're lonely can feel as if we're admitting we've failed in life's most fundamental domains: belonging, love, attachment." That's why it's so hard sometimes for us to say, "I feel alone, I feel lonely." Because deep within us, there is this desire to be known and to be loved, and it feels like we're saying, "I can't do that, I'm failing." Loneliness, this isolation, is so bad for us in body and soul because it shows how we are made for the opposite. How being created in God's image is about being connected first to God, but also actually to each other. I want us to look in the text and notice this curious, odd discrepancy as a way into thinking about, for this third week, what does it mean that we are created in God's image? Look in verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness." And then skip down to verse 27. "So God created mankind in his own image." Notice there in verse 26, for the first time in the story of Genesis 1, God has this self-deliberation for creation. And notice he says, let us make mankind in our image. There is the use of the plural, but then in verse 27, it's the singular. God made mankind in his image. So there is some difference there between the plural and the singular right next to each other. Why is that? Commentators from the very beginning have puzzled over this. Some have suggested, well, maybe this is a plural of majesty, the royal we. But the problem is that that's not actually grammatically attested. We don't see that anywhere else with verbs. So then some people, well, maybe this is a plural that says something about like the heavenly court, like God is addressing the angels in the heavenly court. We see that in other places in the Old Testament, that God speaks to the heavenly court. But the problem here is that it says that we're made in God's image, not the image of God and anyone or anything else. So I think the best answer here is that this is the hint of a plurality within God. The very first sentences of Genesis 1 talk about the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. So there already is a sense here in the text, and now I see it here, that there is something that is plural within God. Now it's only a hint because it's the beginning of the story. We don't read the first page of a story and think it's going to reveal everything that we're able to know about the main character. But as this story goes on and unfolds over the course of the Bible, we see more that yes, there is a plurality within God, that he is one God, and as we have just said in our baptismal liturgy, that he is the one God, the name, singular, Father, Son, and Spirit. That there is both one God, and somehow within him, there is this threeness, this plurality that is hinted at here in Genesis, let us make, and the rest of Scripture unfolds for us. So that means that in some way, relationship, interpersonal relationship is fundamental to who God is. That from the beginning, before the beginning, there's one God who is also three. Which means that sometimes I think we think, oh, there's one God and there's this threeness, this Father, Son, and Spirit that are like appendages coming out from God, and that we can get behind them and there's the one God. But what this is saying is that all the way down, there is a threeness and a oneness, and neither of those are somehow to be opposed to each other. Now, there's a lot more that we can say about that, and there's also significant mystery of what we cannot say. But for this morning, what I want to hone in on is this means that relationship is fundamental, is basic to the whole universe. That the interpersonal is true and is there before there is anything actually that comes to be other than God. So as Jonathan Edwards says, love is at the center of existence. Love is not just some evolutionary mechanism so that we pass on our genes. It is not something that we should allow to be co-opted by greeting card companies and made into some cheap sentimentalism. Love is what the universe is built around and on. Because within God, Father, Son, and Spirit, before anything exists, there is eternal love and a sharing and a delight and a communion within himself. And so when he says, let us make mankind in our image, it means that there is something interpersonal about bearing God's image. That we are created vertically, as we said 2 weeks ago, to relate to God, But it also means that if we are created in God's image, that we are created to relate to each other. And we see that here in our text. Look in verse 27. How do we image a God who is plural in himself? Verse 27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Notice that parallelism there in verse 27. The end of the two lines, he created them, is the exact same. But what changes, and therefore what's connected to each other, is in the image of God, male and female. What Genesis is saying is that to bear God's image is to be created male and female, that some dimension of how we mirror and how we represent this interpersonal God is that we are created from the very beginning to be interpersonal. That there is one humankind and a humankind that only and always exists as male and female. That there is this oneness and this difference, and both of them are basic and from the very beginning. This is amazing, potent stuff that is said right here, that is counter and is beautiful all the way through human history. What this text is telling us is that man is fully in the image of God, woman is fully in the image of God. That there is a shared and equal dignity for men and women. There is a shared and equal value for men and women. There is a shared and equal worth for men and women. And as verse 28 goes on to say, this mission that is given to rule and to subdue and to develop is given to men and women. Women exercising dominion, women ruling, women taking care and cultivating, men exercising dominion, men ruling, men taking care and developing. This is a shared mission that is given to men and women because it's given to human beings together. And we're made male and female. And so our sexed difference, our bodies being different, is part of the essential, very goodness of creation. To be alike and different at the same time, God is saying, is part of what he delights in, part of what he intends. The wonder that God speaks when he says this is very good includes that we are men and women together. There is nothing here in Genesis 1 in any way to make women feel inferior or sub because they are not men. And if you think that is obvious, if you're like, well, this is a duh moment, everybody knows that, the answer is no. Everybody does not know this. In ancient Rome, sociologists and historians have looked at all of the different kind of evidence that they can amass and have estimated that the ratio of men to women was 131 men for 100 women. You only get that extreme discrepancy in ratio if, as one scholar says, you are tampering with human life. And that is exactly what we see in the ancient world. In the Roman world into which Christianity was born, was known for infanticide, which is a slightly dry way of saying murdering babies, especially females. Look over on page 12 in your bulletin. I want you to see something that is shocking for how mundane and normal it is. This is a letter that was recovered in Oxyrhynchus, where a ton of papyri were found. It's a letter from a guy named Hilarion. It's 1 BC, all right? Interesting timing, 1 BC. Hilarion has gone with other people from his village, and he's gone to the city of Alexandria, one of the most major cities of the ancient world, in order to find work. And he's writing back to his wife, Alice, about it. And he says, listen, we're still in Alexandria. Don't worry about this. If they go home completely, so if everybody else goes, I'm going to stay in Alexandria. I'm asking you and begging you to take care of the little child, and when we are paid, I will send it to you right away. So you hear the parental affection and his care for his wife. And then he goes on, if you happen to be pregnant again, if it is a boy, leave it. If it is a girl, throw it out. And then he goes on, he says, you have told Aphrodisias, who seems to be one of his companions, don't forget me. How could I possibly forget you? Please do not be worried. And you have here this obvious affection of a husband for his wife and thinking as a parent, and the casual, inhumane cruelty that doesn't see men as women as equal and in the image of God, that says, if this baby is a girl, expose it, throw her out, leave her to die. That is the world into which Christianity is born. That is the world in which Judaism, that had this sacred text, and the Christians came into as a countercultural movement that said all human life has worth and has dignity because every person, male or female, whatever value or worth they seem to offer to our society, bears God's image. And the shocking thing is that there are ways in which this message is just as countercultural today, but from different angles. There's a lot that I can unpack. I'll just share this one. Recently, there was a book written in France by a woman, Alice Coffin, who is a city councilor actually for Paris. And in it, she talks about that she refuses to listen to music or to read books or watch films if they have been made by a man. She says, it is not enough for women to help one another. We have to erase men. Erase them from our minds, from our pictures, from our representation. Now, that's not being said in a vacuum. That is being said in a context where there is violence and there is oppression and there is an asymmetrical history of exploitation that is much more men to women, and at the same time, that is profoundly wrong. From its own angle, it is as wrong in kind, not in degree, but in kind, as Hilarion's letter 2,000 years ago. Because all of that undermines and contradicts the shared partnership and value and worth that God is telling us is true of humankind, male and female. So profoundly, this passage invites us into a sense of the dignity and the wonder that it means that we are created male and female to relate to and to share in God's mission. And I think this passage goes further. I think this says more than just male and female relating to each other as bearing God's image, but it speaks to a wider sense of all humankind, human beings, how we relate to one another. And part of that is because the sexual differentiation of male and female that is singled out here is obviously not unique to human beings. The animals in Genesis 1 share in being male and female. So the interdependence that is in view here, I think, fundamentally includes male and female, but it's not exhausted by that. It actually speaks, I think, even more to that there is no person who in himself or in herself is complete. You may remember from a couple decades ago, Jerry Maguire. And the climax of that movie, Tom Cruise burst into the house and he says to Renee Zellweger, "You complete me." And I remember, I was a college student, I remember seeing that, and this sense, I remember some Christians being like, well, that is wrong. Like, no, you don't. Like, if you just have Jesus, you have enough. You don't need somebody else to complete you. And I think, surprisingly, like in all the dumbness of that line, there is more truth than what I heard from some Christians reacting to it. That absolutely, I do need you to complete me. And you need me to complete you. We are not made to be autonomous. We're not made to be on our own. We are made to be interdependent. That we do need each other in order to live into what it means to image God. I can't be truly human apart from other people. Here is a slightly enjoyable yet awkward way we're going to apply this, depending on your personality. The introverts among you, I apologize up front. What I want you to do is I want you to turn to somebody next to you, okay? Could be somebody that you came with, could be somebody beautifully that you didn't come with, all right? Here's what I want you to say, and you're going to both say it to each other in turn, all right? I want you to say, okay, you image God. And if you know their name, introduce yourself so that you should know their name so you can use it. You, their name, image God. And then I want you to say, I need you to show me who God is. All right? You image God. I need you to show me who God is. All right? Take a minute and do that with each other. And maybe you're getting to say it to somebody that you've never met. Maybe you're getting to say it to somebody who can't even respond it to you in some way. And that too is deeply true. And that is part of this beautiful truth that we need each other to image God. Every person images God. And what we see here in Genesis is a departure from the story of its day where usually only the elite got to image God. The king alone might be the image of God for his people. And here we see that image is democratized. It means everybody is a part of imaging God. And no single person images God sufficiently or exhaustively. And that is true, not just in this room right now, but it is true across time and space. So male image bearers need female image bearers to show them who God is. Female image bearers need male image bearers to show them who God is. White image bearers need black image bearers to show them who God is. Black image bearers need white image bearers to show them who God is. And on, American image bearers need Korean image bearers. And Korean image bearers need Chinese image bearers who need Arabian image bearers. All of us need each other. That the image of God is revealed more fully across time, like the centuries, as well as across space. Which means then that no one group gets to somehow put themselves at the center or to make themselves normative for what it means to be human. There is no place for some racism or racial superiority or inferiority or centering or somehow, and we do it, we imagine ourselves and everything else relates to us. And this says that we're all on the same playing field. And yet the challenge is that deep within us, we desire to center ourselves. Instead of it being interdependent, we think of ourselves at the center and everybody else is there in some way to relate to us, to serve us. And one of the places that we see that dynamic of our heart surfaced especially is not surprisingly in one of the most intimate relationships that we can experience, marriage. So Casey Musgraves, who's a singer, was married for 2 years and recently got a divorce, and what she said was this: divorce is the ultimate decision you can make for yourself to move from something that isn't serving you or that other person anymore. It's the ultimate decision you make for yourself to move from, to move on, to move away from something or someone that isn't serving you. Or as Laura Bazelin puts it, she said, I divorced my husband not because I didn't love him, I divorced him because I love myself more. And she goes on to talk about the importance of she's a law professor and feels passionately called into the work of defending and seeking the acquittal of those who have been wrongfully imprisoned and convicted. And she said the significance of this calling has meant making choice after choice to prioritize my career, which has meant frequently that I'm not present, literally and figuratively. And she acknowledges, she says, I could change jobs. I could try to work different hours or work closer to home. But, she says, deep inside, I knew that trying to force myself to subordinate my ambitions and always put our children first would have been impossible without lopping off a vital part of myself. And she says, I can imagine my daughter, when she's old enough, at her wedding, and if I were still together with my husband in this sham of a marriage, she says, I can imagine people coming up and congratulating me as the mother of the bride and on my own marriage. And she said, and I'm sitting there with a smile on my face, freezing the resentment that's beneath it, while the third vodka tonic is sweating in my hand. I don't bring up either of these stories to somehow make light of the hardship and the challenge and what went into that, or to make some kind of comments about that, but to try to bring to the surface the reality of our desire to center ourselves. Expressed there, but in all of our hearts. And the reality, as Bazelon says, it does take lopping off something vital, something that feels vital to ourselves, for us actually not to put ourselves at the center. Because all of us have our hearts turned in on themselves, where we no longer relate to God, we mirror ourselves. We don't relate rightly to creation. We seek to exploit it or to make our name through it. And we don't love and serve others. We look for them to serve us. The only thing that can somehow upend or undo our hearts is the self-sacrificing love of Jesus. Jesus, who perfectly imaged what it means to be an image of God, to relate to others, who valued women, who honored them, who invited them as his disciples, who included them in his ministry, who had time for them, who saw them. Jesus, who, while fundamentally and profoundly Jewish, went to the Samaritan woman, crossed over into an unclean land in order to heal the demoniac, who sent his disciples and said, there are sheep that I have that don't belong to this flock, who saw and envisioned his life was not just for his own people, but for people from every tribe and every tongue and every nation. The Jesus who in his love for others says in Luke 19, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. That is the opposite of moving on from someone that isn't serving you. Jesus moves toward those who didn't serve him, those who are his enemies, those who are hostile and separated from him and from each other. And Jesus, in his love, doesn't move on or move away. He moves toward us to seek and to save the lost, to give his life as the ransom in our place. And it is only in receiving that sacrificial love that there is any hope that our hearts have not just a vital part lopped off, but that our dead hearts are given life so that we can be renewed in what it means to love each other, what it means to be renewed into what we were created for, this interdependence, where we're not at the center, because Jesus has recentered our life on him. Only that kind of love and receiving that can somehow open us up to be able to love each other as we were created for. That is what Jesus is calling us into. That's what Jesus is creating for us, a love that enables us to truly interact in real godly ways as men and women, to see the image bearing in those who are most different from us, and to give not out of some duty, but out of actually a heart that has received and therefore can give. Let's pray. Jesus, I pray specifically that you would grow us in a humility where we haven't centered ourselves and we haven't somehow gone and thought that we are worthless, but that we have the true measure of who we are and who others are. And so that we can live into this joyful understanding and embrace of who you have made us, and that you have made us to be able to need and to be able to give, to be interdependent. Would you renew us? Would Redeemer be a place where there is more image of God growing as you grow us in this renewal of loving each other through you? Jesus, we need your Spirit to be at work at our hearts to accomplish this. And we ask in your name. Amen.